Hi, I'm Mike with House on the Mend, and in this video we are going to be completing our basement office cabinets. So let's get started.
House on the Mend.
Well, in our last video we built these cabinet boxes, and in this video we have a lot to do to finish them. First of all, let's go top to bottom. At the very top, I need to run wiring for the lights that are going to go in the display boxes up top. Speaking of the display boxes, when I look at the back and I see the dark wood as well as this beautiful cedar here, I find the two contrasts to be distracting. So I want to take some 1/4-inch plywood and stain it to match and cover that area so it looks like a completely enclosed box of one color. Then we need to trim out the entire two boxes. I have this wood here. It had a rough side for some reason when I purchased it, and it was about 7/8 of an inch, so I planed it down so that both sides are smooth to 3/4 of an inch, which is your standard for trim and for the doors that we're going to make. Speaking of the doors, once everything is trimmed out and these pieces are cut down to be more functional for these spaces, then we need to make the cabinet doors. We need to make frames up here, and we need to make the drawer down at the very bottom below our electronics cabinet. So the first thing I want to do to make the trimming out process easier is take both the cabinets and lay them down with their faces up. It's going to be really easy to set the pieces of trim wood down, cut the cross pieces, and get everything situated, marked for our pocket hole screws, attached together to confirm the fit, and then we can move that whole frame in one piece over to some sawhorses, stain it, and sand it. And while the boxes are out of the way, a good friend of mine, Eddie, pointed out after he had been down in the basement looking at the progress I had made that it's going to be pretty difficult to get the sheetrock ceiling up into that area with these tall boxes. I had explained to him that I had a 90-degree drill and I could get up there with some screws probably and get the job done, but in thinking about it more, he's absolutely right. While the boxes are out of the way, let's go ahead and put up some of the resilient channel that has that sound deadening quality. Let's put up one piece of sheetrock, and then I'm going to finish off the one remaining piece of trim on the wall that I had been waiting to do, while also getting that wiring in place for the lights. All right, I have the cabinets on their backs, and I am temporarily attaching these three pieces of trim. These are called the stiles. So in trim work, you have the rails and stiles. And they're three different sizes. This one is 3.5 because we're wanting a standoff away from the wall where the outlet and the camera box are going to be. That's the reason for that one's thickness. This one is 2.5, and that's because I have 2 3/4 pieces of plywood, basically the sides of the cabinets here, to disguise. And this one over here is 1.5 inches, just a nice standard piece of trim coming off of the visible wall that will be right over here. I have taken those measurements. I know exactly the measurements for each side. And now I'm also taking my speed square and I'm marking on these boards where I want the trim to start. So for example, there's a critical spot right here where the camera box is going to be. I need the trim just barely coming past this shelf and mostly going up this way, and vice versa here, mostly going down that way, to give me the exact dimensions for that camera box to fit there. And that's the only real critical one. Since this one is coming up this way, I'm going to have this one match so the doors don't look odd. Once I have all the rails cut, I'm going to flip everything over, attach them with pocket hole joinery, sand everything on the face, stain it to match this English chestnut stain from the outside of the box, and we'll be ready to move on to the next step. Well, my wife found on Instagram this really unique modular storage system that can be 3D printed. So what you're looking at here is the back of the unit, what actually gets affixed to a wall, or in our case the cabinets, through these little screw holes here. And these rails you see that look like train tracks actually correspond to the backs of these little storage cases that you also 3D print. Those rails meet up together, you slide them in place. Integral into each piece are two of these little stops that can just be pushed. And when it rolls along on the sliding rail here, it will bump up against there and lock it into place so it doesn't slide off one way or the other. Now it comes in 3 different sizes. This is the 1x1 they call it, so a single width square. The others are 2, so a rectangle of 2 of these boxes, and this is the big one, the 3. So I printed out several of each. The 2s I'm going to use for my charging cables, perfect for those. And the 3, let me pull it out here, I'm going to put my pens and things in. And then these singles, I think I'll put some batteries or screws, you know, whatever you want. You could see this easily being used in a workshop with screws and nuts and bolts. Really cool. And I love how it slides and can also pivot down so you can get an easy reach on your materials. Now these rails that you see on the side here are to join them together, like you see here, where they are interlocked into each other and then can be slid across the rail. So let's build one and I'll show you how it works here. Here's a little single, and it's got this awesome little piece. All this is integral. You didn't even have to assemble these little bits here. It all 3D prints on its own. So pull this out just a bit and slide it into this little notch here. Just like this. I'm trying to stay in focus for you. And there you go. Pretty sweet little system. Let's bring it over to the cabinet and install it. So here's the spot I picked. It's just a couple inches up off of the bottom of this particular cabinet. I've got it close to where the door is going to be, but slid back enough so it's not an imposition when I open the door to be using things. And we are over enough that I can slide on my biggest 3-piece one and then connect the other one right here and slide them on to the end together. So I've got my level up to make sure that we are good to go there. And I'm using my switch driver by Works. I just love this guy. I'm going to pre-drill. Then switch over to the driver bit. Now that that's done, I'm going to push this little stop out, and then I'm going to start sliding the first one on. It's a pretty tough friction fit. Oh, that's going on pretty smooth actually. Cool. Now right before it starts engaging, I want to slide on my little single. Just like that. Bring it all the way over. Sweet. And there we go.
Perfect.
Well, that's a lot of progress that we've made, and it's already paying dividends. I've already got some of my electronics in here charging and stored. I've got my camera box in here to hold my various cameras and keep them dust free, which in the area we live is a great benefit. So the next thing we need to do is start making doors. We need to make a drawer down here and then a face for it, and then all the doors for the rest of the cabinets. And to make the what you call rails and stiles of each door, we're going to be using a very common router bit set that has opposing bits. So they are basically mirror images of each other, and they have these bearings in them that the wood rides along as it's being milled. So I'll show you this process once I get it all set up on my little router station, and we'll start making doors. So measuring all of these openings to get exact dimensions so that I can calculate for the doors would be a perfect use case for my Recon T1 Tomahawk digital tape measure, because it will calculate its own base up through its own length, and then as you raise the tape measure, will give you the exact inside dimensions. The only problem is it's got a very bad parasitic draw. It's been like 2 weeks since I've touched it, and the battery is completely dead. Now, on the other hand, this Sigament has been sitting around for the same amount of time, and it fires right up because it doesn't have the same parasitic draw on the battery constantly. So I could just use that one if I wanted to, but the cool thing about the T1 Tomahawk is it's got this little screen that would have shown me all the measurements that I could transfer over to my little drawing here. I'm not paid nor sponsored by either one of these companies. I bought both of these tools with my own money, but that's just a little data point if you're considering one. With the Tomahawk, unfortunately, just sitting there charging, doing nothing, I can turn my attention over to the Sigament by pressing this button right here. I get the laser beam telling me what distance it's going to measure. A click of the button, and there is my final inside dimension measurement. Or by simply pulling out the tape, it switches to this mode. I have it set to calculate its own length, and it gives me the same dimension. Well, after struggling a little with technology, I was able to get all the measurements that I needed for the openings of our cabinets and plotted those out to make a cut list for the doors. I then went through and on my little router table here, routed all those pieces. As you can see in this picture here, they turned out really good. There's a slight little bit of play between the corresponding pieces, but that will allow for plenty of glue. And we are ready here to start gluing up one of our panels. As you can see in this picture, in the waiting wings over here are all the doors that I have with 1/4 inch panels that are going to slide right into these grooves. This particular one is going to be the face of the drawer at the bottom of the cabinet, and for that reason I am using 1/2 inch plywood that, as you can see in this picture, I milled down to have a 1/4 inch lip, and that way when I make this one, the back here is going to be flush with the back of the perimeter wooden pieces, and that'll make it a lot easier to attach to the front and not get warped from putting screws in or anything like that. Now we are going to be using just standard wood glue. This happens to be Titebond, and I'm going to put glue in just the outside couple inches of each of these stiles, and then in the corresponding area of the rails, and then I'm just going to brush them. I don't want to put any glue in the field where the panel resides, because this is plywood, this is actual wood. Actual wood is much more reactive to changes in temperature and humidity, and it expands and contracts accordingly, whereas plywood is much more stable, so you do not need to glue your panel. Now, I've said this before in other videos, but this is among my favorite parts of the whole process, is gluing up panels. For some reason, I just really enjoy it. Hi, Reese. So a little glue. Then I have just a tiny little brush. I'm just going to spread that glue around. That'll give me less squeeze out and more surface area actually covered. And if we do get any squeeze out, I have a wet rag right here ready to wipe that off immediately. It's a lot easier to wipe it off now than it is to have it squeeze out and dry and have to scrape it off and sand it more. It's an incredible pain where you can just wipe it off while it's wet. All right, let's slide this piece in, line it up perfect with the outside here. Good. And then in this case, I'm going to slide the panel in first because it's such a tall and skinny run. Sometimes I'll put both pieces in and then slide the panel in last, but I think it'd be more of a struggle here with it being this tall. Now there are a lot of very decent clamp manufacturers out there. These happen to be made by Jet, and I really like them. I'll leave a link to these. I really like the releases and the kind of rubberized feet on here when they clamp the wood together. They never leave any kind of creases or mars in the wood, even with really soft wood. All right, this is all lined up. I'm just going to start applying some tension. Just enough to squeeze all those joints together, but not bow it up like this, right? And there we go. Here's the front, nice and flat. Here's the back of the panel, and it is flush because I used that 1/2 inch wood. So a couple more wipes of any squeezed out glue. We're ready to set this one aside. So check this out. It just take it over to a corner, set it like that, and your workspace is clear to make another panel. So I've got, what do I got? 5 left to do today. And then the top ones I'm going to wait to do because I'm going to be putting either an acrylic or glass into those. So I'm going to want to stain those 4 pieces, the rails and stiles for each door, at the same time I stain these. And there we go, all set in their clamps. All right, these have cooked overnight, so they are completely dry. And let's take a look. Yeah, that turned out great. All right, I sanded the wood on the perimeter down to 120 because I knew I would want to come through again and do the finish sanding down to 220 that I already did with the panel. So before I do that though, I want to mark out where our door hinge is going to go. So I have made this little jig. I've made several of these over the years. It's a piece of plexiglass put into a piece of wood, in this case a piece of MDF plywood. And as you can see in this picture, I have set it up to go down from the top or the bottom of the door 4 inches, and that's where we're going to drill our hole for this little hinge here. It's just a circular area that the hinge goes into, and then you can screw it into place to hold it, and then this part here screws into the cabinet. So I want to mark that. First thing I want to do is look at the door and see which side I like for the side that's going to have the handle, which side to have the hinge. I want to make sure there's no knots where the hinge is going to go, because it's hard to drill into a knot with a large drill bit. In this case we can go either way, so I'm going to line up my jig, and I just got an awl, which is just like a little sharp point to mark it. Then I'll take it out to the drill press, and as you can see here, I'll drill the holes, and then we can come back, sand, and stain these doors. All right, feels like I've been putting on stain and polyurethane for days. So here's the two frames that are going to have the plexiglass on them for the top display cases. Here's all the doors. And then I have a piece of trim for the toe kick. And then that one right there is going to trim out the top for just a little extra detail. When you have trim like this, that is not flush with the case, that overlaps the case, you should use hinges like this. They actually go right on this edge of the trim and screw in like this. However, in my case, I have these hinges, and I have like a dozen of them that I bought when a store was going out of business, like 25 years ago, and I've been carrying them around in this coffee can. So we're going to use these. But to do that, I had to equal the trim to the case with little scrap pieces like this that I have glued and stapled into place. And then I made this jig so they will line up these screw holes perfectly to the little pieces here that get screwed into the case itself and then mount onto these hinges. Now these hinges for the display cases, on the other hand, are brand new. They're from Rockler, and the doors will lift up and be locked into place while I load items into it, and then this gets pushed and the door will come down and click into place. These are great. I'll leave a link for them. Well, here we go. A nice end to the basement office project. I thought these doors turned out beautiful. I like the very simplistic, almost shaker style detail that's on the doors themselves. I love how my display cases turned out. I have this one full. This one over here is still ready to be filled up. The full extension drawer down here is going to be very handy for things that I don't necessarily want to organize in the cabinets themselves. The next thing I will probably do is make shelves for them. It's just a simple cut of plywood with a little piece of trim on the front, and so we can utilize all those shelf pins we put in on the first video. So if you found this video helpful, will you please give it a thumbs up? It's really helpful to the channel. Also, please consider subscribing. I work really hard to put out good quality content, very detailed, and it's very helpful to the channel. Now, speaking of our videos, we're going to take a break from the basement. I have a few tool review videos that I need to finish up and upload to the channel since it's springtime and everybody's working outside getting their yards ready. And I'm excited about those products to bring them to you. I'll leave links to the hinges and a lot of the other things that I talked about in this video. Now, full disclosure, most of those will be Amazon affiliate links, so if you click on them and do end up making any purchase, it won't cost you a thing, but I do get a small reward at the end of the month. Until next time, thank you for watching.